Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 31, Euthyphro 2a. We've just finished reading the Platonic dialogue Hippias Minor, which we found was about the concept of ability. Ability is a means, but the many think that ability is an end in itself, and actually a good end. Therefore, someone with ability appears to be good. To dramatize abstract aspects, Plato thought up some paradigms, which are minimalist concrete representations. Ability may be misconstrued as good on two levels, the social and the technological, and for these Plato used two paradigms, the aristocrat and the master craftsman. For real ability, which is a means but not a good in itself, Plato used the paradigm dialectician. A dialectician knows what ability really is, that it is only a means, but a dialectician is also the only craftsman where the end is necessarily good. These paradigms or paradigmata are too basic in themselves to be useful in a drama, so Plato has to use degmata, which are the paradigmata with additional details. The degma for the master craftsman is the sophist Hippias. The degma for the aristocrat is Eudicus, who's actually a spokesman for a chorus of aristocrats who don't speak. He's the only one who speaks. And the degma for the dialectician is Socrates. Plato uses historical figures, but he doesn't base the degmata on the historical figures. He takes features of the historical figures for additions to the base paradigma of each. In the dialogue, we see how Hippias appears to be good through just having ability. We see how Eudicus appears to be good through having power, dynamis, which is the same word as ability. And we see how Socrates doesn't appear to be good, although he is the only one with ability to a good end, because the others don't recognize his ability. Dialectic is not a well-known ability at the time. This is what Plato does in many dialogues. He shows how things can appear to be the opposite of what they actually are. One dialogue isn't enough to prove a general rule, so here's another one. It's about the same length as Hippias Minor. It's named after Socrates' interlocutor, Euthyphro in English, Euthyphro in Latin, and Euthyphron in Greek. Euthyphron means right thinking, but that's more the wishful thinking of his parents than any clue by Plato to the character, because Plato is using the details of a historical character, and that happens to be his name. The Euthyphro is usually the first dialogue of the collected works of Plato, and this is an arrangement going back to antiquity. But this doesn't mean that Euthyphro was the first dialogue Plato ever wrote, even though it may be, we don't know. The traditional position is based on the misconception that there are four dialogues which record four stages in Socrates' trial and execution. The conversation in Euthyphro apparently occurred when Socrates went to give his deposition before his trial. Then the next dialogue in the series is Apologia, which purportedly report Socrates' words in the actual trial. This is followed by the dialogue Kriton, in which the friend of Socrates, Kriton, comes to the prison in order to encourage Socrates to escape. And then the fourth dialogue is Phaidon, in which we apparently receive the report of the last day of Socrates, including his death at the end of the dialogue. It's true that our dialogue does have something to do with the deposition of Socrates before his trial, but this doesn't mean that it's a historical record. We can pretend that it is for now. We don't know. We haven't read the dialogue. But when we read the dialogue, we should keep this in mind. It's also possible that Plato has thought of the best situation in which to dramatize the aspects of a certain concept which we don't know about yet. The best way to come to any decision about a Platonic dialogue is to read the dialogue, so that's what we should do now. At least we'll make a start. I'm using the 1995 Oxford edition, although it doesn't really differ that much from Burnett's 1900 edition. The dialogue begins on page 2 of volume 1 of Stephanus's edition. Tine autoron o Socrates gergonen, hotisou tasen Lukeo katalipon diatribas, en thade nun diatribes peritentu basileos stoan. Ugar pu kai soige dicetis us tunchane proston basilea hosperemoi. Utoi de Athenaioi ge Euthyphron, dicen auten calusin ala graphen. The first speaker is Euthyphro, and the second speaker is Socrates. We know that because they each address each other by name. Euthyphro begins with a question, literally, what more new thing has happened, Socrates, which usually would mean what strange thing has happened. Why is it the case that, and then he carries on, that you have left the pastimes in the Lukeion and are now spending time or wasting time around the Stoa of the king. We already learned quite a bit from this opening question. In this dialogue, at least, we gather from Euthyphro's question that Socrates spends much of his time in Lykeion, or Lyceum, one of the three big open areas around Athens. There's Kinos Arges in the south, Lykeion, or Lyceum, to the east, and Academia to the north. In other dialogues, Socrates spends a lot of his time in Academia, not in Lykeion. It doesn't really matter which area Euthyphro thinks Socrates is spending his time in. The intention is that Socrates is there talking to young men. In each of these grounds, there is a public gymnasium where the young men went to train to become soldiers. Diatribe is a wearing away, and then it came to be passing the time, and then it came to be wasting time with a teacher and students, and then became a lesson. Euthyphro may regard Socrates as a sophist, because the sophists also went to the gymnasia to find wealthy young men to teach them for money. Euthyphro may not understand that Socrates is actually not a sophist, but at least he's correct that Socrates is usually not hanging around the Stoa of the king, which is where Euthyphro now meets him. This particular Stoa is a small building on the northwest side of the Agora, just south of the railway track going from Athens down to the port of Piraeus. I suppose I should add that the railway wasn't there at the time. It's a modern innovation. In the democracy of Athens, there were 10 artificial tribes, and each tribe annually voted for one leader. So there were 10 annual leaders in Athens, parallel to the 2 consuls in Rome. And the main one was the Archon Basileus, the King Archon. He was the officer with some of the roles which the kings of old used to have. One of these roles was to preside over trials concerning offences to the gods. Before a trial, the prosecutor and the defendant and any witnesses had to give a deposition to the Archon Basileus in the Stoa of the king. Euthyphro's question reveals that both Euthyphro and Socrates are at the Stoa of the king, and this already suggests that they both are involved in trials concerning an offence to the gods. Euthyphro is surprised that Socrates is wasting his time here at the Stoa instead of wasting his time with young men. Euthyphro continues, "For I don't suppose you happen to have a Dike in front of the king as I do. Dike in Hesiod is a daughter of Zeus, and she is justice." Dike came to be the legal aspect of justice, and then it became a case. At the time of this dialogue, Dike had all 3 meanings. It was the goddess, it was justice, and it was a case. We may understand that Euthyphro is at the Stoa of the king because he has just given his deposition, and Socrates is on his way to the Stoa. Otherwise, Euthyphro wouldn't ask whether Socrates had a Dike. Socrates replies, "The Athenians don't call this a Dike, but a graphe." Graphe is literally a writ, but the distinction between Dike and graphe is that Dike is a personal case, while graphe is a case involving the entire polis. Any citizen has the right to prosecute another citizen on behalf of the polis. We don't know how yet, but it is significant that Euthyphro's Dike and Socrates' graphe will both be dealt with by the Archon Basileus.